Hey everyone, recently our team has been exploring and building MCP servers for various use cases. We tested the Postman's remote MCP server, Hugging Face's remote MCP server, and GitHub's remote MCP server too. Let's go through some of the interesting findings we discovered while doing this. This is the JSON report for the Hugging Faces test run. If we look at one of the test reports for the tool GR1 Flux1, we get an error saying no value provided for the required argument prompt. And if you look at the request, actually none of the arguments are being passed over here. It's an empty request. Why is Specmatic not sending a required argument? Let's look at the tool schema to understand this. As you can see, there is no required field present over here. And if you look at the properties, there are all these properties present and prompt is also present over here. So this implies all of these properties are basically optional since no required key is present, which means prompt is also not a required field, but the implementation is treating it as a required field. This is clearly a drift between the schema and the implementation. And Specmatic Auto-Test was able to catch such a crucial issue automatically. If we go back to the JSON report, we see another error over here for the same tool. The error says value 705 is greater than the maximum value 16. This value 705 is being sent in the request for this particular key num inference type. And it seems like this is not a valid value. It has to be less than 16, which is the maximum constraint over here. Again, the same question, why is Specmatic sending an invalid value? Let's go to the schema to understand that. Let's look at the schema for this particular field. We can see the type is number. The description is numeric value between 1 and 16. Now, as you can observe, this constraint is not specified using the standard minimum and maximum keys in the JSON schema. And this is the reason Specmatic was unable to know about this constraint. And that's why Specmatic ended up sending a value greater than 16. Same can happen with an LLM too. Since the constraints are not specified using the standard minimum and maximum keywords, it can also end up sending a value that is not within this specified range, leading to incorrect results. So it's better to use the standard keys which are available in JSON schema to define such constraints. This shows the spec design is a little poor. So those are some of the issues that we found with Hugging Face's remote MCP server. Now let's look at some of the interesting findings we had at the Postman MCP server's end. This is the test report for the Postman MCP server test run. Let's start with an interesting one. Let's look at the test report for the update spec file tool. We're getting an error here saying only one of content type or name should be provided. Let's look at the request that's being sent. Oh, so in the request, all of the 3 keys are being sent, but the MCP server is expecting that only one of these 3 keys should be present in the request at a time. Again, why is Specmatic sending all the keys when only one of them should be sent at a time? Let's look at the schema. So this is the input schema for the update spec file tool, and the properties are over here. We can see all the properties, name, type, content, spec ID and file path are also present over there, and in the required, spec ID and file path are required. But if we look at the schema, there is no mention of that particular implementation data, that only one of these 3 keys should be sent in the request at a time. Ideally, the spec should have explicitly specified this using maybe an operator like one-off. This again is poor spec design. Let's look at another one. Going back to the JSON report, and let's look at the test report for get collections. Over here, the error says the limit parameter provided is invalid. Value must be a positive integer smaller than 100. Okay, let's look at the request. The request is sending a value 408, which is definitely not smaller than 100. And hence this test is failing. But why is Specmatic sending this value in the first place? Why it is not sending a valid value? Again, same rigmarole. Let's look at the schema. Get collections, input schema, properties, limit. Okay. The schema here defines that limit should be of type integer. And there is some description saying this is the maximum number of rows to return the response. But we can see there is no constraint specified over here that it has to be less than 100 or so. This shows there is a drift between schema and the implementation. It's important to be specific about the schema. You can't leave these things open to an LLM. This will lead to potential hallucinations. So it's better to be using the standard keys which are present in the JSON schema to define such constraints. This experiment of testing various remote MCP servers using Specmatic MCP Auto-Test made us realize the power of this feature. You can run the MCP Auto-Test on your own MCP server and catch such issues with schema mismatch and other implementation issues if there is drift or not, etc. using Specmatic MCP Auto-Test. And the other important benefit it brings is everything the test runs, it runs it automatically. We don't need to put in much effort.